Episode 114. Harry shook his head, wondering as he did so how he could have failed to ask Neville this in almost 4 years of knowing him. Yes, they were talking about Neville's parents, said Dumbledore. His father, Frank, was an auror just like Professor Moody. He and his wife were tortured for information about Voldemort's whereabouts after he lost his powers, as you heard. So they're dead? Said Harry quietly. No, said Dumbledore, his voice full of a bitterness Harry had never heard there before. They are insane. They are both in St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. I believe Neville visits them with his grandmother during the holidays. They do not recognize him. Harry sat there horror-struck. He had never known, never in 4 years bothered to find out. The Longbottoms were very popular, said Dumbledore. The attacks on them came after Voldemort's fall from power, just when everyone thought they were safe. Those attacks caused a wave of fury such as I have never known. The ministry was under great pressure to catch those who had done it. Unfortunately, the Longbottoms' evidence was, given their condition, none too reliable. Then Mr. Crouch's son might not have been involved, said Harry. Dumbledore shook his head. As to that, I have no idea. Harry sat in silence once more, watching the contents of the pensieve swirl. There were 2 more questions he was burning to ask, but they considered the guilt of living people. He said, Mr. Bagman has never been accused of any dark activity since, said Dumbledore calmly. Right, said Harry hastily, staring at the contents of the pensieve again, which were swirling more slowly now that Dumbledore had stopped adding thoughts. But the pensieve seemed to be asking his question for him. Snape's face was swimming on the surface again. Dumbledore glanced down into it and then up at Harry. No more has Professor Snape, he said. Harry looked into Dumbledore's light blue eyes, and the thing he really wanted to know spilled out of his mouth before he could stop it. What made you think he'd really stop supporting Voldemort, Professor? Dumbledore held Harry's gaze for a few seconds, and then said, That, Harry, is a matter between Professor Snape and myself. Harry knew that the interview was over. Dumbledore did not look angry, yet there was a finality in his tone that told Harry it was time to go. He stood up, and so did Dumbledore. Harry, he said as Harry reached the door, please do not speak about Neville's parents to anyone else. He has the right to let people know when he is ready. Yes, Professor, said Harry, turning to go. And Harry looked back. Dumbledore was standing over the pensieve, his face lit from beneath by its silvery spots of light, looking older than ever. He stared at Harry for a moment and then said, Good luck with the 3rd task. Chapter 31. The 3rd task. Dumbledore reckons you know who's getting stronger again as well? Ron whispered. Everything Harry had seen in the pensieve, nearly everything Dumbledore had told and shown him afterwards, he had now shared with Ron and Hermione. And, of course, with Sirius, to whom Harry had sent an owl the moment he had left Dumbledore's office. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat up late in the common room once again that night, talking it all over until Harry's mind was reeling, until he understood what Dumbledore had meant about a head becoming so full of thoughts that it would have been a relief to siphon them off. Ron stared into the common room fire. Harry thought he saw Ron shiver slightly, even though the evening was warm. "And he trusts Snape?" Ron said. "He really trusts Snape, even though he knows he was a Death Eater?" "Yes," said Harry. Hermione had not spoken for 10 minutes. She was sitting with her forehead in her hands, staring at her knees. Harry thought she too looked as though she could have done with a pensieve. "Rita Skeeter," she muttered finally. "How can you be worrying about her now?" said Ron in disbelief. "I'm not worrying about her," Hermione said, to her knees. "I'm just thinking. Remember what she said to me in the Three Broomsticks? 'I know things about Ludo Bagman that would make your hair curl.' This is what she meant, isn't it? She reported his trial. She knew he'd passed information to the Death Eaters. And Winky, too, remember? 'Mr. Bagman is a bad wizard.' Mr. Crouch would have been furious he got off. He would have talked about it at home." "Yeah, but Bagman didn't pass information on purpose, did he?" Hermione shrugged. "And Fudge reckons Madame Maxime attacked Crouch?" Ron said, turning back to Harry. "Yeah," said Harry, "but he's only saying that because Crouch disappeared near the Beauxbatons carriage." "We never thought of her, did we?" said Ron slowly. "Mind you, she's definitely got giant blood, and she doesn't want to admit it." "Well, of course she doesn't," said Hermione sharply, looking up. "Look what happened to Hagrid when Rita found out about his mother. Look at Fudge, jumping to conclusions about her just because she's part giant. Who needs that sort of prejudice? I'd probably say I had big bones if I knew that's what I'd get for telling the truth." Hermione looked at her watch. "We haven't done any practicing," she said, looking shocked. "We were going to do the impediment jinx. We'll have to really get down to it tomorrow. Come on, Harry. You need to get some sleep." Harry and Ron went slowly upstairs to their dormitory. As Harry pulled on his pajamas, he looked over at Neville's bed. True to his word to Dumbledore, he had not told Ron and Hermione about Neville's parents. As Harry took off his glasses and climbed into his four-poster, he imagined how it must feel to have parents still living but unable to recognize you. He often got sympathy from strangers for being an orphan, but as he listened to Neville's snores, he thought that Neville deserved it more than he did. Lying in the darkness, Harry felt a rush of anger and hate toward the people who had tortured Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom. He remembered the jeers of the crowd as Crouch's son and his companions had been dragged from the court by the Dementors. He understood how they had felt. Then he remembered the milk-white face of the screaming boy and realized with a jolt that he had died a year later. It was Voldemort, Harry thought. Staring up at the canopy of his bed in the darkness, it all came back to Voldemort. He was the one who had torn these families apart, who had ruined all these lives. Ron and Hermione were supposed to be revising for their exams, which would finish on the day of the third task, but they were putting most of their efforts into helping Harry prepare. "Don't worry about it," Hermione said shortly when Harry pointed this out to them, and said he didn't mind practicing on his own for a while. "At least we'll get top marks in Defense Against the Dark Arts. We'd have never found out about all these hexes in class." "Good training for when we're all auras," said Ron excitedly, attempting the impediment jinx on a wasp that had buzzed into the room and making it stop dead in midair. The mood in the castle as they entered June became excited and tense again. Everyone was looking forward to the third task, which would take place a week before the end of term. Harry was practicing hexes in every available moment. He felt more confident about this task than either of the others. Difficult and dangerous though it would undoubtedly be, Moody was right. Harry had managed to find his way past monstrous creatures and enchanted barriers before now, And this time he had some notice, some chance to prepare himself for what lay ahead.